Hey y'all, we are going to begin with the first root in the roots book, an, meaning not, without, unusual, or irregular. When a or an, meaning not or without, comes at the beginning of certain words, it gives those words a negative meaning. Anything that is asymmetrical is not symmetrical, and anything that is atypical is not typical. Atheist and agnostic both begin with the negative a and are close in meaning. An atheist, from the roots a meaning without and the meaning God, is without a God, whereas an agnostic, a meaning not and nos meaning to know, does not know whether there is a God. In other words, the atheist is sure there is no God, whereas the agnostic simply does not know. So, the way that I try and remember these words a and an is like, I think of remember this big circle with a line through it that we put over things when we don't want them? That kind of thing. So an is like the big circle. It immediately makes something negative. It flips its meaning to the opposite, right? All right, let's look at our first word. It is agnostic. It is a noun, which is really important because we want to make sure we always know the part of speech that goes with a word. It helps us figure out how it can be used in a sentence. And we want to make sure that we are looking at these roots. So find their roots. They are in brackets right next to agnostic, right? So it's the word and then the pronunciation and then the roots. And I want you to highlight these right now. Highlight a meaning not and nos meaning to know, because you're responsible for knowing these roots from now until forever, right? So that's super important. And then we have the actual meaning. So I want you to grab your pen and I want you to underline. One who does not know whether there is a God. You can do it in pencil too, that's fine. And then I use a question mark to help me remember this, right? So agnostic, if the roots are a meaning not and nos meaning to know, like that's what it means. Not to know. An agnostic person doesn't know if there's a God. They have a big question mark, they're unsure. Our sentence, he had lost his former faith and had become an agnostic. Sometimes the sentences in the book are the sentences you see on the test. So it's really, really good for you to take a few minutes and look over those and practice the ones in the exercises, because sometimes those are on there too. Our next word is amoral. Amoral is an adjective, so it can only be used to describe a noun. Be aware of that, right? You'll notice it doesn't have any special roots. We know it has the a at the beginning, of course, which is what makes it a negative, but it's just a prefix put on the word moral. So the word amoral means neither moral nor immoral, unable to distinguish between right and wrong. And so what I have is a picture of me and one of my goddaughters, who at this point was an infant. She was amoral here. She didn't know the difference between right and wrong. She wasn't sure. She hadn't been taught. She didn't really understand yet. So she wouldn't have been able to distinguish what was right and what was wrong. She was amoral. We generally think of this with like babies for the most part. Almost forgot our sentence. There it is. Infants are amoral. Pretty simple, right? Next word, anarchy, is a noun. Now, first of all, we find our roots, right? Here we go. An meaning without and arch meaning ruler. So without a ruler. Pretty simple. And then we're going to find our meaning and underline it. Political disorder and confusion. Very nice. Now I want you to look at anarchy specifically right now. Do you see that part that's italicized that says literal without a ruler? That's the literal meaning of the word. Like if you broke it down to its original meaning, anarchy meant without a ruler. The reason it's in italics is because we don't necessarily use that specific meaning anymore. Okay? So we're only looking at the secondary definition that I had you underline. Political disorder and confusion. That's the newer meaning, right? So we have our ruler here being sent away. Do you like that? You see what I did there? See, it's a ruler. Ha 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 ha. And then there's also this idea of like people who believe in anarchy, right? This picture doesn't want to get bigger. There we go. And they talk about how anarchy has a political meaning. That's not the meaning we mean either, so we're not going to think about that. We're talking about like super unrest, so places like Syria right now, where there's a lot of unrest, and Iraq, though there's some anarchy there. It's a noun, so I'm using it as a noun. There is anarchy, right? Because there's some lawlessness and there's political disorder. We're not really sure who's in charge at different times. And there's confusion. People are trying to get away from where the disruptions are, but they're having to leave their homes. So that's what we think of when we think of anarchy. That's the meaning we're talking about, okay? Not the original meaning or the kind of political people who want anarchy. They have a different definition of it a lot of the time, okay? All right, anecdote is next. It is a noun, and just like before, we're first going to look at our roots. So find your roots and highlight them. And meaning not, and ekdotos, given out. So not given out. That seems like a weird roots for this word when you hear what it means, but we'll talk about that. So we have the definition in italics, which we're not going to underline, but we do need to read. Originally not published, as some stories were made public by publishing them, and others were kept private. So originally an anecdote was a story you didn't publish, hence the reason we have this not and given out, because you didn't give that story out. But the meaning's changed pretty substantially, so take a look at our definition of it now. A short account of some interesting or humorous incident. Okay? So when we talk about an anecdote now, it's just like a true story, and a lot of the time it's entertaining. So here we have a man saying, well, there was this one crazy time my dad got bit by a snake, and then you've got this guy over here, right, who actually was bit by a snake, and he said, no, you fool, I said I needed an antidote. Those are two different words. We are talking about anecdotes, the stories. The guy who got bit does not want an anecdote. He wants something that'll take care of his bite, right? Then, I brought you another picture too, just, in case that one didn't work. We have our chickens in the elevator. Don't you just love the inherent mystery of elevators? You go in, and when doors open, you never know what's going to be on the other side. It talks about, hobby for the lonely. So for this guy, right, he might have a really great anecdote later about this person in the elevator who just kept talking to him. You're like, oh my gosh, guys, you're never going to believe it. I got in the elevator, and this chicken was talking to me, and he just kept talking about elevators, and it was kind of different, right? So, that's anecdotes. Our sentence. The speaker enlivened his talk with humorous anecdotes. Anemia, noun. Highlight your roots. An means without, and hem means blood. So, without blood. Now, someone who has anemia is not actually lacking all of their blood. So let's underline the actual meaning. A deficiency of red blood cells. Right, so they're missing certain parts of their blood. So if you look, this is what normal blood looks like, and this is what anemic blood looks like. Look at the difference in the number of red blood cells. It's huge, right? Her weakness was caused by anemia. That's our sentence. All right, anesthetic is an adjective, so it's used to describe a noun. We have the roots an meaning without and esthet meaning feeling. So guess what? When there's an anesthetic, you can't feel anything. Anesthetic is a drug causing one to be insensitive to pain. Now, the reason this is an adjective is because generally you follow it with the word drug or medicine or something, right? So I know that you're like, but that sounds like a noun, Miss Naylor. Well, okay, yeah, it can be used as a noun. It's meant to be an adjective. We sometimes use it as a noun instead. So take a good hard look at it. Because here's our sentence. Before the operation, he was given an anesthetic. Well, that makes it a noun, right? It's the object of the sentence. But it can be used as he was given an anesthetic drug, in which case it would be used as an adjective, okay? And here I have my lady who has an anesthetic. She must be going to the dentist. They're going to do something horrible, so they gave her an anesthetic. Okay? By the way, an anesthetic doesn't actually have to put you to sleep. It can be what we call a local anesthetic, so sometimes they just put it in one part of your body and just that part gets numb. So it can be more specific to one place. All right. Anomaly is a noun. Anomaly can be kind of confusing with another word we're going to talk about, so pay close attention here. Anomaly has two roots. Highlight them. And meaning not and homo meaning same. You've probably heard some of those roots before, right? We've talked about homonyms or homophones. Homophones are words that sound alike but have different meanings because they homo, same, phone, sound, same sound, right? It is a noun that means a rare exception, something that is not normal, okay? So, an anomaly would be something like a flower growing in the middle of a snowstorm, or an albino lion, so a lion that's born without any pigmentation, right? Or a bird that cannot fly. That's our sentence here, right? Charles Darwin wrote, "There is no greater anomaly in nature than a bird that cannot fly." So I put penguins because penguins are birds, but they can't fly, unless you count how they fly through the water. But I don't think that's what Darwin was talking about. Anomaly is really similar to atypical, which we're going to talk about in a second. So be aware. The key thing here is to remember that anomaly is a noun. It's only going to be used as a noun. And that's what's important. It is a noun, okay? Then we have anonymous. Highlight your roots. And meaning without and ona meaning name. It is an adjective. And it means having an unknown or anonymous name. My favorite example of this has to be from Gossip Girl, because you have two different girls in the same, very similar outfits and wearing the same mask, and they both have blonde hair, and so this guy thinks they're the same person, but they're not. They're anonymous in their masquerade masks, right? And their matching dresses. He can't tell them apart. He doesn't know who they are, really. He thinks he does, but he's wrong. You can also have like an anonymous quote. You've probably heard of that. So in that case, you have a quotation, but no one knows who said it or where it came from, or the person chooses not to tell. Our sentence: the donor of the new building wished to remain anonymous. Asymmetrical. Oh, this has three roots. What? Make sure you highlight all of them. So you have a meaning not, sim meaning together, and meter meaning measure. So if we're going to break this down really literally, it means like not measured together, not the same length. It is an adjective, so that's how we use it. And let's underline our meaning. Not having both sides exactly like, not symmetrical. So we have this skirt here, right? And it's short on one side and long on the other. It's an asymmetrical skirt, right? But then we also have, do you guys know who this is, perhaps? Chuck Norris? Kind of cool guy, right? Yeah, for a while he had some asymmetrical hair. He had a mullet. And if you're not familiar with the mullet is asymmetrical because it is short in the front and long in the back. So, some serious asymmetrical hair right there. All right, atheist. So we heard about this at the beginning as well. It's easy to confuse with agnostic unless you know the roots, and then it's easy to figure out because atheist has the roots a meaning without and the meaning God. So an atheist is without a God. Literally, without a God. That's the definition. One who is without a God. One who denies the existence of God. So, I think about it like this to help me remember. So we've got like different religions of the world, and an atheist doesn't subscribe to any of them. Right? They're just like, nope, not for me. Okay? And here's the tough one, atypical. So we talked earlier about anomaly, which is the noun. It's a rare exception. Atypical, though, is an adjective. You'll notice it doesn't have any roots because it's just not typical, which is its definition. The root A makes it a negative, and typical, of course, we are familiar with. So, something that's atypical, like this deer has atypical antlers because one goes up and the other kind of comes around. Those are atypical antlers. I did not mean to draw that line. Sorry, guys. This right here is a cartoon, right? And it's supposed to represent kind of our atypical winter last year where we had so many days out because of all of the winter weather. So it says, okay, show of hands, who's tired of snow? And everybody's hands are poking through the snow, right? That was an atypical winter for Texas. We usually don't have that many days out of school. We usually don't have that much winter weather. Let's listen to the sentences. So I'm going to read the anomaly sentence, and I want you to hear how that's a noun, and then the atypical sentence, and pay attention to how that is used as an adjective, okay? So we have anomaly. Charles Darwin wrote, "There is no greater anomaly in nature than a bird that cannot fly." Then we have atypical. A classical concert performed by a rock group would certainly be atypical. Okay? So paying attention to what parts of speech we need. I talked here about atypical antlers. Well, that's describing antlers, so it's an adjective. I talked about an atypical winter. So that's describing what kind of winter it was. That's what makes it an adjective. All right, you are now responsible for doing some exercises, so please make sure you take care of those. Remember that the words we learned this week, agnostic, amoral, anarchy, anecdote, anemia, anesthetic, anomaly, anonymous, asymmetrical, atheist, and atypical, will be on the quiz on Thursday. Then after that, they kind of disappear. We don't really go back to them on a quiz. But the roots, a and an meaning not, without, unusual, or irregular, nos to know, arch, ruler, ekdotos given out, hem, blood, esthet, feeling, homo, same, onim, name, sim, together, meter, measure, and the, God, are roots that could show up on any quiz from now on. So have that in mind, okay? Go get your study on, and good luck on the quiz.